So I have a big problem with guitar amplifiers. The problem is that I'm kind of addicted to them and I have a lot of guitar amps. The other problem is that I'm kind of running out of space. Amps are big, I have a lot of them, and not only do they take up a lot of room, but it's hard to effectively use them at a moment's notice. So I think I found some solutions for those problems, and we're gonna talk about them in this video. But first, why don't we hear some of these great amps that I can use with just the push of a button? And let me know in the comments, are you an amp person till the day you die? Are they gonna pry that old amp from your hands? Or have you made the leap to full-on modeling? I'd love to hear about it, so let me know in the comments. So you know when you get to a certain age and you finally get the car that you've always wanted, or maybe you took that trip that you always wanted to, that's kind of what this amp wall is for me. So I've been building an amp collection for my entire life. I love amplifiers of all shapes and sizes and tones, and we're gonna focus on all of them. We'll hear each one and we'll talk about what they do and what they do well. You'll notice there's a couple empty bays in the shelf too. I haven't fully completed the collection. It's a lifelong process, right? But we'll talk about not only this beautiful custom cabinet that a friend of mine made for me here in Nashville, but everything in this cabinet is really centered around the Kahayan Amp Switcher. So before we dive into all of these amps, I want to let you guys know that you can download the track that I was playing through below in the links. There's also a link to hundreds of guitar lessons that you can try free for 14 days on my site, workingclassguitar.com. And we got to give a shout out to our friends at Sweetwater. They're sponsoring the video, and they've been instrumental, no pun intended, in helping us grow the channel by getting us great gear to talk about and putting our videos and guitar lessons here on my channel and on my site. So thanks, Sweetwater. Click the link below for more info. So the Kahayan Amp Switcher allows me to take my single guitar signal and distribute it to 8 different amplifiers. Now I'm only using 6 at the moment because that's all that's wired up in here. Like I said, the collection will expand, right? And I can select any one of those amps with these buttons here. Basically what happens is your guitar signal comes in, and then what you do is send a signal from the Kahayan into the input of any one of these amps. Now we gotta come out of the amp comes out of the speaker output and goes back into the Kahayan. Now, what we need to do is hook up a speaker. So I don't have any live speakers in the room right now, but I have these aux boxes and they act as my speaker, and I can select either one of those here. Now, ideally, I'd have 4 different cabinets somewhere in a bunker and could switch between a 412 or a 112, 212, whatever. So it's a really flexible piece of gear if you're going to do this crazy kind of layout. Excessive, I know, and to get even more excessive, why do I have 2 aux boxes? Well, I used to do some contract work for Universal Audio at NAMM shows, and this was definitely part of the payment, these aux boxes. So I figured, why not have one set up for one cabinet, one set up for another, switch back and forth if I want. And it works out, and it's a lot of fun. Super excessive to the most people probably watching this, but I'm having a blast and it sounds freaking great. So the oldest amplifier in my collection so far is a 1965 Fender Bassman. And this is an amp you're gonna find in virtually every guitar player's house or studio here in Nashville. They sound great live, they take pedals well, and it's kind of the baseline for where I start with clean tones and testing pedals, doing some tracking sessions, and of course I move on to all the other amps eventually too. But you can't go wrong with a Fender Bassman, particularly the mid-60s stuff is great, the silver face ones are awesome, and of course, you know, the blonde ones are killer too. I'd love to have one of those. And you'll see I have a graphic here because I come into the Kahayan, out into the Bassman, back out of the Bassman, into the Kahayan, there it is, and then into an aux because that's my speaker. And I'm simulating the speaker with what you see on the screen. So a 412 cabinet, mic'd up with some plate reverb. The aux isn't creating any amplifier sound, just cabinets. Now when it comes to Fender amps, yeah, they do the great clean thing, but once you start pushing them a little bit, this is just on 2, you're gonna hear it's that great breakup sound. And it only gets more compressed and gnarly from there as I move up. But you'll hear how the lows work on a Fender amp as you keep pushing it. It's almost like kind of a fuzz pedal. It's not super round and articulate, but you know, it makes for a killer sound nonetheless. And again, it's my go-to for 75% of the tones I start with. So that's your Bassman. So the amp just below the Bassman here is one I've lusted after for many years. It's the Marshall Silver Jubilee, or 2555X, which is a reissue of an amplifier they built for 1 year in 1987 to commemorate the 25th anniversary of Marshall amplifiers. To me, this amplifier is like a hot-rodded JCM 800, and you'll see people like Slash and Joe Bonamassa favor these amps. I've seen Joe out on the road with them, and you know, obviously they get crunchy and have some great sustain, but they'll do great clean sounds as well. So it's really kind of like a 2-channel amplifier. I can take this push-pull switch, push it in, and now I have a gain channel. And I can adjust that here with the input gain as the first knob. I mean, rock and roll for days, and there's so much more on tap. There's even this push-pull knob here where when you engage it, it gives you slightly more compression, a little bit more of a squeezed feel. Let's check it out. It's subtle, but it feels really good. All my Marshall dreams have come true just with that amp, but there's more. So you're probably also going to ask what this box with the LED screen is behind me, and this is a voltage regulator from Amp Maniac. You've probably seen other companies like Brown Box. This one works a little better for me because I can really dial in the voltage that I want. These old amplifiers don't love high current coming out of the wall, and in Nashville here, I've seen it 126 to 130 volts out of the wall. And if I'm running this amp all day, I don't want to tax the transformers like that. So I can adjust it here. All the amps are actually tapped off of that, and it's working just fine. And of course, I can switch back and forth all day long. I do that. It's super fun, but everything's safe. Everything is running optimally, at least the best that I can make it here in my little studio. So another amp that's near and dear to me is the Rock TS1 here in bay number 1. So I'll hit my switch. Now I'm in bay 1. And Rocks are really known for how they feel, their touch responsiveness. They're very fast. They're great with pedals. But notice how the low end, if I did that on a Fender, even when I started to crank the gain a little, it would not stay round and nice and, you know, piano-like, as they say. So the amp does have a lot of bells and whistles, and that is intimidating to some people, but once you figure it out, it really becomes even more flexible than you'd imagine. We can, you know, incorporate the lead master, and it's a cascading sort of gain situation, so all of the knobs are contributing. Every single one I turn up will contribute to my overall gain sound. It's got a classic move on it here where you throw the bypass control. That can actually take the tone stack out of the circuit. So it's like guitar, output, bam. Really focused, great overdrive sound. And it even has like sort of a built-in, you know, clean boost, if you will. They call it the FET boost, and you can crank how much of it you want. Let's turn it all the way up. Get even more gain. And it's still holding together on those low notes. So I can get a lot of different tones. I can kind of pull that back, pull the gain back. Get some of that more aggressive Robin Ford, Larry Carlton stuff if I want. This is one of my favorite amps of all time. Bay number 1, sounds great. One of my go-tos for sure. So I fired up the 73 Marshall. This is a 100-watt version, and I would not be able to play this in this room without all of this great stuff connected to it. Now, I certainly could, but aux boxes really help, bring these amplifiers to a listenable level. Now, these amplifiers, from 68 to 72 were hand wired, and then 73 and beyond was more of the circuit board amplifiers, which is what this one is. And the cool thing about it, you get all the same Marshall mojo pretty much, great transformers, all that kind of stuff, but it's a lot less expensive than the earlier versions. And friends have told me, oh, they're gonna sound great, go ahead and get one. I did. The guy I bought this from, he was like, do you know what you're getting? This is really loud. How are you gonna use this? I got it covered, I told him. So $1,700 later, which is a steal by today's standards, and I got a killer Marshall. So if I go from the 2-rock, like a clean sound, I'm gonna hit my button, number 2. Sounds like a Marshall. Now what I can do is I have the channels jumped. Push it a little bit more. Worth the price of admission right there. And again, just bouncing back and forth between all of them with the Kahayan and with the great aux boxes. You can tell why I don't leave this room very much. So this amp is very, very cool. This is the Divided by 13 RSA 23. Now, Fred, who is the founder of Divided by 13, designer and builder, creates a lot of amplifiers specifically for what players want and desire and request, particularly those in the California-based area. A lot of LA session musicians. These amps are made for Rusty Anderson and people like that. And he's become friends with them, designed models around what they're asking for. And this one has a really cool vibe because it's powered by KT88, so I've never had any of the big bottle amplifiers before. And it does this sort of Marshall Vox hybrid thing. Now, it's fairly clean here, but as I turn it up, it's just gonna grind and get really cool. Notice the sizzle and the sparkle on top. And as you push it, it has sort of both of those sounds, but I hear some matchless stuff in there too, and it just keeps kind of getting crazier. But with any amp, as you start to push it into higher gain, there's compression happening, there's a little less clarity in the notes, and that's starting to happen a little bit, but it's still darn cool. And it's got this this first channel technically that they call the click channel. Let's do this. And we can get all these different sounds just by clicking this knob. A little less bass. Different mid-range character there. I can turn the gain back some. So lots and lots of options with this amp. What I like to do, let me turn it down a little bit. What I like to do is put the Marshall on one side and the RSA 23 on another when I'm tracking big rhythm guitar parts. So it really makes it sound like a huge amplifier. And I think Fred's super cool. He's done a lot of really great models. Check him out online. And you don't see a lot of them out there, but the ones that you do are really, really great. It's a cool amp, different sound than anything else I have. And that's a theme. Nothing really sort of, steps on each other with all of these amps. That's the goal. All right, we got one more to check out. So I never had a Tweed era Fender amp before. It never really kind of was my thing. But once I started figuring out, oh man, this is a totally different sound than the mid-60s era Fenders. And it's the, the sound of Billy Gibbons or Don Felder from the Eagles. So many recordings. Keith Richards, I'm sure, used them. Lots and lots of people used Tweed Deluxes in the studio. And there's a really, really cool quality that is just so different from all of the other mid-60s that we know and love. So I couldn't find an affordable vintage one, so I found this Fender amp that they made for the Edge from U2. He loved that Tweed Deluxe sound. They made one for him with a different speaker. They changed the taper on the volume a little bit and tightened up the low end. And if we're coming from the RSA 23, the divided-by, click of a button, there's that warm tweed kind of thing that we know and love. That's like as clean as I can get it. As I start to turn the volume up, it gives me all of that sort of, I don't know, tweed thing that's just so awesome. Right amount of furriness, but the clarity of those notes, even with the gain, is really awesome. Feels really connected to me. If I turn it up a little bit more, yeah, it's just killer. Such a great sound. I'm glad I finally found something. If I turn my volume control way down, really far down, man, it really cleans up. Live, I'd probably do that with a volume pedal, but this thing with the speaker sounds really good. So with a combo amp like this, how do I incorporate it with the aux? Well, you can see it, unfortunately, I have to lay it down so it doesn't look as cool as I would like it to. And I just took the speaker, disconnected it, and then I take a speaker cable, run it back to the Kahayan, that goes to the aux, and that's what you're hearing. So flavors upon flavors upon flavors. You can see why I'm in amp heaven. But really, the unsung hero to this entire amp wall is the cabinet, and I gotta tell you the story about how it was made. One of my longtime friends here in Nashville is engineer, producer, and master carpenter Kenny Varga. Kenny and I have been friends for over 20 years, and I didn't realize that he was such a master woodworker on top of all of his other musical talents. When he's not doing session work, you can find Kenny in his wood shop, not just building amp shelves for guys like me, but building recording consoles for some of the biggest studios, not only here in Nashville, but all over the country. So this room isn't very big, so when I invited Kenny over to come and help me figure this project out, he meticulously designed this thing so it would not only be aesthetically pleasing, it wouldn't be too big or wouldn't be cumbersome, be super functional. He even tried to match the stain to the other furniture I have in here as best as he could. Wow. Oh yes. And you can see that he put LED lights in all of the bays. It's on a switch behind it. It's also on wheels too, and he put skirts over top of the wheels so that you can't see these big casters. It really, really is a beautiful piece of artwork, and I even made him sign it because to me, it is a work of art. I get it, it's a lot. It's a ton of gear, it's a lot to work with. There's obviously expenses involved, but the thing is, I've been building towards this for my whole life. I've been a professional musician since I was 18, saving my pennies, hoarding the gear, taking it with me from town to town, wherever I moved to, from different apartments to finally a house. And I've made friends with great companies that have helped me out along the way too, and made friends with master carpenters like Kenny to build me this kind of stuff. So it's all really a culmination of all those things coming together to, let me have as much fun with this stuff as I can. So whether it's the amps, the aux box, the beautiful cabinet, none of it all comes together without the Kahayan Amp Switcher. That's really what this video is about. How can we take these multiple amplifiers and use them like this? The Kahayan is a great tool. If you're into this kind of thing, check out the Kahayan, check it out on Sweetwater. I'll put links below. You guys can really see where you can take a multiple amp setup. And don't forget to grab the track too, that's in the link below, as well as a special link to try hundreds of guitar lessons on my site, Working Class Guitar, free for 14 days. This video was a blast to make. It's not like my typical one. There's cameras and wires and microphones and everything all over the place, but I wanted to sort of give you a peek behind the curtain, show you the Kahayan, show you the setup, and show you what might be possible if you want to run a bunch of amps and have fun like I am. Either way, have fun with what you got. Go play, and I'll see you next time.